Problem with these Max Verstappen masterclasses, of course, is that there'll be an outcry now. Oh, wasn't it a boring race? It was anything but. It was captivating, I thought, the way Red Bull and Max managed that race, managed the day, managed the different wind conditions. And we had a fascinating challenge from Ferrari, with Charles Leclerc starting on the soft tyre, moving to the medium. I gave Max a hard time for starting on the soft in Singapore, and I stand by that. Here, a completely different situation, because the soft was much nearer the medium. The hard was out of the game completely. And it was a close call whether to start on the soft or the medium, or vice versa. Anyway, Max is on the pole on the medium tyres, like everybody else around him, except Charles. Lando's there with him. And Max makes a perfect start into turn one, clean start out of there. Indeed, it was a clean start more or less for everybody. Nobody touched going into turn one in Austin. I guess everybody was a bit spooked after the sprint race. Certainly the McLaren drivers looking fairly circumspect going through there as well. So it was Max Verstappen coming out of turn one in the lead, but up to second with that grip ahead of Lando Norris, Charles Leclerc, pushing Max very hard for a couple of laps until Max settled in, got the temperatures up, and started to pull away gradually, as he always does, from Charles. From this moment on, of course, in theory, it was Max's race to lose, because it was to his advantage probably that Charles was in front of Lando Norris, and the odds were that the soft tyre was going to go off relatively quickly and that Lando would get up to second place then, by which time Max would have a comfortable cushion. And it kind of worked out that way, although there was a virtual safety car which allowed the tyre temperatures to come down. This virtual safety car caused by a collision between Carlos Sainz and Kimi Antonelli. One of those things where Carlos goes down the inside. You assume Antonelli knows he's there and he's getting a bit of room, but he didn't. So we'll see what happens with the stewards after that. Kind of felt sorry for Carlos after all that, walking his way back to the pits. Kimi actually kept going and went on to set fastest lap on a new set of tyres. But anyway, that's another story. They're in the virtual safety car, and when the virtual safety car conditions ended, it actually favoured Leclerc, because he's on the soft tyres, he got them up to temperature sooner, and he started to close the gap a little bit to Max. We're talking 2-3 seconds here, but Max kind of had it under control. Charles was never in DRS range of Max. That was a good thing. And so gradually, as we approached half distance, Lando Norris started to gain ground on Charles Leclerc as the red tyres, the soft tyres, started to go away. And we saw an enthralling battle at this stage. Lots of great overheads, lots of nice low down shots, and lots of classic Charles Leclerc, short corner driver, getting the car beautifully rotated in all the important places on the lap. And Lando Norris, beautifully smooth in everything he does with his transitions. But from apex to exit, just about everywhere, he's got more load on the car. And he had 3 strikes. He had 3 strikes for track limits on the penultimate corner. Because as he goes to the curb there, he's just got more load on the right rear and on the steering, whereas Charles has got the car much straighter. And it was a classic example of how Charles, like Max, can create a bigger sweet spot around which to operate when the tyres are starting to go away. Eventually, of course, Lando did get Charles in DRS. It was a big effect with the wind conditions they had. It was massive. You just saw the DRS open on the McLaren and boom, he was on the Ferrari. And a nice pass by Lando in the end. But in my view, looking back now, Lando lost quite a lot of time early on behind Charles when he started to feel the left front graining and see the left front graining, and got into a bit of a discussion with his race engineers and the team about how much he should worry about that. And they said, well, not really worried about it, Lando. It's a real limited track. You can push quite hard. You can push harder through the triple apex right-hander and so forth. But of course, this comes under the heading of not having the knowledge that, say, Max Verstappen and Red Bull had from the sprint race. Because McLaren didn't do the sprint race, they were out in the first corner, this sort of graining issue was something that affected Lando. Probably affected him for about 4 or 5 laps, I would think. And in that moment, of course, Charles Leclerc had consolidated his P2. So it took Lando much longer to get Leclerc than it should have. And in many ways that coloured his race. Leclerc then came in. Well, actually, Ferrari, I think, made a mistake because, and Mark Slade actually sent me a message about that, and he agreed that Ferrari really, the lap on which Charles lost P2 to Lando Norris should have been the lap on which they just brought Charles in straight away. But they kept him out for another lap, and that was difficult because he had a bit of a Lewis Hamilton thing going on there, with Lewis wanting to get past as well, and I think he lost time there. He lost, I don't know how much time, but it was definitely a weird call. And actually, when he went out from his pit stop, Charles was on the radio saying, that was a very late call, why didn't you tell me sooner? on that lap. And they said, well, you were going through the quick corners, Charles, we didn't want to talk to you. And so Charles was a bit annoyed by that. But as he went out, he said on the radio, now I hope I've got a race car I can use here. How hard can I push it? It didn't really get much response. It was kind of along the lines of, yeah, you can go pretty hard, Charles. He's on the medium. And I was thinking, I've got to confess, I was thinking this was an unbelievably good call, because Charles Leclerc on medium tyres in Austin, second half of the race, against certainly the McLarens. I thought he was going to do Lando over the race distance. And I thought he might put real pressure on Max in the closing laps, with everybody else obviously on softs. But it didn't quite work out that way. I think what I wasn't taking into account was that the Ferrari is still not a very good car, and it was using its tyres a lot more than, say, a Red Bull at the back end of the race, if they'd been on softs, would have used them, or indeed a McLaren, which was still, I think, the best car of the race, the McLaren car. And so Charles was then in front of Lando Norris again, who had a slightly slow pit stop. Left front was a little bit slow. So he was behind Charles, but he caught Charles pretty quickly. And I say that pretty quickly in italics, because I think he overused the tyres early on after the pit stop. Very easy to say that, very tempting when you're on a new set of soft tyres to just go super quick and catch the guy in front who's on older medium tyres. But it was always going to be a fragile thing to get that soft tyre to the end of the race. If Lando hadn't pushed quite as hard coming out of the pits for the first, say, 5 laps, I think he might have just been able to get Charles in one go and had a better chance of maybe putting some pressure on Max Verstappen. As it was, he got Charles towards the end when Charles' mediums went off. Again, a surprise, because you would imagine that Charles is very, very good at managing the tyres. And he was super quick through the fast corners, through turns 3, 4, 5 into 6. Charles was fabulous there today. Even though there was, as Mark Slade predicted, there was the difference in wind. It was now coming from the west mainly. Charles still very, very quick there. The Ferrari, though, not as good a car as the McLaren. That was quite clear, and using its tyres more, and Charles having to work harder. But it was also interesting in the back end of the race, I thought, how Charles managed to pull away from Lewis Hamilton. Lewis had looked pretty good early on. It hadn't been too far away from Lando, and he was ahead of Oscar Piastri. And very quickly he was on Charles when Charles' soft tyres went off, as I say. But on the soft tyre, Lewis faded, whereas Charles did a really good job on the mediums. Yep, they finished 3rd and 4th in the end, but it was a disappointing race in many ways for Lewis, because he looked very strong, particularly on Friday, and it kind of went away in qualifying in Q3. And then in the race, he was never up there with Charles. So this is a very, very strong race for Charles politically within the team. Ferrari, not a great car, and of course beat Oscar Piastri. Oscar Piastri, one of the mysteries of this weekend. I imagine the press release is going to say we just didn't have the pace today. But looking back, of course, a lot of this is due to what happened in the sprint race. We know how good that car was, and we know how good Lando Norris's lap could have been. He could have got the pole in that car, and that means that Oscar Piastri probably could have got the pole in that car as well. And McLaren's relatively poor performance today, relatively poor given how much domination they've had, can be traced right back to sprint qualifying and not doing the job there and being where they were on the grid. And then, of course, following Singapore, Oscar Piastri being as racy as he wanted to be going to that first corner, triggering the accident, but nonetheless, in reality, not doing anything wrong in terms of the sporting code, just going for one of the up and unders. And of course, that does bring into focus now the situation for McLaren, because Max Verstappen quite correctly said after the race, and it was beautiful. I mean, right at the end, when Lando was in free air catching Max had quite a lot of traffic to pass, all battling for 16th place. So they were all pretty good. They got out of the way quite well. But obviously it cost Max some time. But nonetheless, he was not in any way fraught under pressure and just won the race beautifully. But when he got out of the car, barely sweating, one of the comments he made was, I do have some sort of chance now in the Drivers' Championship. We just need to keep it going, keep the momentum going. Which is a real thing now. Of course, we have to consider Max, and we've been talking about it anyway on live streams, but Max Verstappen has a real chance now of winning a 5th world title. But the fascinating thing now, post-Austin, is McLaren are in a confused state, because now they know that Max Verstappen is a real contender for the Drivers' Championship. The logical thing for them is to have a real contender for the Drivers' Championship as well, who is, I guess, the driver ahead on points, Oscar Piastri. But because there's all this, we got to help Lando, we got to be even between the two cars, all that's going on, they're going to take points from one another. I mean, you could argue today that Lando took points from Oscar, not quite as literal as that, obviously, because the Ferraris were there. But nonetheless, this was a bad weekend for Oscar Piastri, and his teammate took points from him. That's from his perspective. And Max Verstappen, the guy who could go on to win the World Championship, won the race with ease from start to finish. So McLaren do not have a policy now. Obviously, they're not going to start saying we favour Lando or we favour Oscar. It's just not going to happen. We know how McLaren are going to be. Whereas Red Bull, bang, arrow, dead straight focus on Max Verstappen doing the job in the way they have. So it's going to be fascinating now as we move to Mexico, as we move to Brazil, Vegas, and then finally down to Qatar and Abu Dhabi. How it pans out. It's still quite a lot of races when they come off, when you have to list them like that. It's still quite a long way to go in terms of points out there. So yeah, a fabulous weekend for Max Verstappen. I guess his most uncomfortable moment was about 15 laps from the end of the race, when he was told that things are going well, keep it up, Max, you're doing the right thing through the long corner, just half throttle, whatever it was. But remember, this is going to be quite difficult towards the end of the race. Things are going to change. And that's quite an alarming thing to hear and to think about. But of course, he didn't think about it, and he was just focused 100% on what he did. And which reminded me, actually, of we don't talk very much these days about concentration. And I remember that with one and only time I had a long conversation with Jim Clark. I asked him about concentration because he makes a big thing about it in his autobiography. And he said for him, it was the most important thing, obviously, but the most difficult thing to sustain over a Grand Prix distance, concentration. And I got to say, Max's concentration, when he's out there leading the race, there's nobody in front of him. Yeah, he's in free air. Yeah, he's got a clear track in front of him. But what's he thinking? Is he thinking anything other than just brain in the absolute zone and just feeling everything that's going on with the car? Or is he actually, is his mind wandering? I suspect it's the former. I don't think we give Max enough credit for the level of concentration that he's able to sustain over a Grand Prix distance. And I think that's part of the way he drives and how relaxed he can be mentally and psychologically and emotionally because of the way he drives, because of the way he positions the car. I was talking about the comparison between Charles and Lando. Of course, all that applies to Max Verstappen as well. He's getting the car beautifully rotated. We had, as I said, we had some great overhead shots today, which clearly showed the shorter corners being used by Charles Leclerc against Lando Norris. And you would have thought, you just would have thought, if you were Lando following Charles, you'd be thinking, wow, it's unbelievable how he's doing that. How is he doing that? I need to be doing that. But they don't. They just stick with their thing. The same with Liam Lawson. The same with a lot of the long corner drivers. They just don't seem to be able to recognise what the guys like Leclerc and Max are actually doing with the car. Behind the detuned Piastri, who finished relatively close to Lewis Hamilton, but to be beaten by both Ferraris is quite something for Oscar Piastri in a car as good as the McLaren-Mercedes. George Russell, a detuned 6 as well for Mercedes. At one point he got on the radio relatively early in the race and said, Piastri's going quite slowly. George was about two and a half seconds behind Piastri at that point. So please advise George. I guess that comes under the heading of, we never really thought we'd be that good in the race conditions. Yuki Tsunoda had a few incidents, but drove pretty well to finish P7 for Red Bull, underlining again the increase in performance on that car. They've done a great job since Monza, haven't they? Just phenomenal with that new floor. Nico Hulkenberg finally got his just rewards for a great weekend, showed a lot of pace, but obviously got no further than the first corner yesterday through no fault of his own. Finished P8. Oliver Bearman drove really well, I thought, in the Haas-Ferrari to beat Fernando Alonso in the Aston Martin-Mercedes. Yeah, the Aston Martin's not a great car, but I mean, the Haas-Ferrari isn't that good either. So for Ollie to finish P9, and he had a big moment with Yuki as well, which came out of the heading of Yuki moving a little bit as he was breaking into a tight left-hander, and to avoid him, Oliver went down the inside and had a bit of a spin, but he recovered to finish P9 for Haas-Ferrari. Really, really good. Liam Lawson, 11, Lance Stroll, 12. He was on mediums at the end, whereas Fernando was on soft, so he wasn't that far behind Fernando. Kimi Antonelli eventually finished 13th, Alex Albon 14th, and so on down to the back. Bit of an argy-bargy right at the end, actually. Colapinto showing a bit of fire. He was behind his team leader, Pierre Gasly, who was on much older soft tyres at that point. And they gave him some team orders to stay behind because Pierre was in tyre management mode. And he said, but he's going so slow, and just passed him immediately. So I kind of approve that move by Franco, although that was for, what, 17th place. If it was for the lead or something, I'm not sure that it would have been quite as easy for him. So, yeah, as I said in the beginning of this video, it's very easy, I think, to write that off as a fairly boring race in terms of there not being a great number of overtakes. There was the two DRS zones, all the rest of it. But for me, that was another cat and mouse classic race of tension. Really enjoyed it, partly because of the quality of Max's drive. Yeah, Charles Leclerc, I get that he was driver of the day, and I think Ferrari, in many ways, team of the day for going for that tyre choice for Charles. But equally, it's very difficult to come away from the weekend and not say that Max Verstappen was the driver of everything. I mean, he took the sprint pole, he won the sprint, he took the qualifying pole, and then he won the Grand Prix. He didn't get fastest lap. As I say, that was Kimi Antonelli on that new set of tyres right on early in the race. And again, underlining my point of how good the McLaren is, Lando was actually quicker on free track on the soft tyre by about 3/10 than Max Verstappen at the end. So Lando set second fastest lap, Max third fastest lap. But of course, Max was never really pushing the car, so we shouldn't read too much into that. But for me, the McLaren was a beautifully balanced race car today. Very good car. It all added up. It was a compound thing from McLaren's point of view. And it all came to a head, of course, with a total lack of information they got as a result of not running in the sprint. And that showed up with that graining of the left front on, well, both drivers. Oscar was complaining about graining as well on the medium tyre at the start. And that wouldn't have happened probably had they managed to do the full distance or any laps of the sprint race. Before we finish, a quick reminder, you can go to the details in the description below this video of the Ayrton Senna limited edition DNA REC watch, chassis number 98T/4/4, the car that Ayrton raced in the back half of the 86 Formula One season, black and gold Lotus Renault Turbo, great car. And the DNA from that car, from the plenum tubes at the top of the engine that go into the plenum chamber, these plenum tubes actually made by Team Lotus, the alley from those tubes in the face of the watch. So that can be pre-ordered now in, as I say, the description below this video, the limited edition REC watch. Big thanks, of course, to REC watches, to Jetcraft, to Track Ninja, and to OEM Exclusive. Thanks to you for watching. We'll be doing a cam chat tomorrow, as ever, a Monday debrief. And I'll be doing some live streams as well, and we get Mark Slade back to get some of his comments as well on this American Grand Prix. As we look forward also, of course, to Mexico. Big thanks. Take care. See you soon.